Hi guys, today with a new video, and this video will be a video talking about who you should target more in solo shuffle to often win the game, but also just in general try to have an easier game in general. But again, I'm going to preface it with the fact that it depends about the POV. If you are like a destruction warlock, well, it's easier to target who you can target instead of like trying to chase that round one ranged spec that is very hard for you to actually reach, or he's like trying to line of sight your chaos bolt every single time, for example, or your incinerates. So again, it's like an ideal situation. If you can choose between two targets, who are you going to choose? That is going to be the thing. But again, like I said, depends on POV. For some classes, other classes are easier to kill than others. But I'm not going to make a video about every single spec because then it would take me a lot of days, like a month long, to actually talk about it. So I think a generalized thing is good to have, and this is pretty much a preface to actually save all the comments that are going to rain on me. But I'm playing subtlety rogue and DH is super easy for me to kill. I understand that, but that's why it's a POV thing. But let's talk about generalized opinions about those specs. I'm going to talk about mage first. I think fire mage is one of the most targetable DPS specs in the game. They have lower HP pools, so generally they play with glass cannon. If they don't, the damage will be a bit lower from their end, but it's still a highly targetable spec because they have also PvP talent that is going to give them more HP and more range if they stick onto one spot, but you don't want that, so you want them to move every single time, so they lose a lot of value on that subject. So again, fire mage, very targetable. For ice block, whenever it's gone, it's like a free kill. Cauterize is really laughable as a defensive in general. They're slippery a bit, but not as slippery as frost mage. But even if they are slippery, you have to kind of stop them in a way or another. So you can target them by killing them, or you can target them by CCing them to death, pretty much. But the best CC is like, someone that is going to die by your hands. And frost mage is not as killable as a fire mage, but it is definitely killable. Maybe I'm going to put that one at A tier because it really depends on the other specs in the game. But Frost Mage, if you let them do a full Ray of Frost or full Glacial Spike or Frost Bomb, especially since some healers don't dispel Frost Bomb, but they should, you can really get like a bad game. I know that some specs don't like to go for Frost Mage because they feel like they're going to get rooted every single time, but that's the healer's job to kind of dispel it however they can and whenever they can. Like for example, if you're like playing a Holy Paladin, you should free them every single Frost Nova. I know it's very hard because sometimes you want to use it for yourself, but if you want to have an effective game, you want to free them your targets or dispel your targets or whatever you can actually do to help alleviate the problem of a Frost Mage. But then we have Arcane Mage, which I think is really a bait target at higher MMR. Again, yes, at lower MMR, some Arcane Mages don't really know how to kite, and it's definitely easier to kill. And it really depends on your lobby. If you're playing like with an enhancement shaman, elemental shaman, disc priest, for example, yeah, triple purge, he has nothing for him, right? But if you're playing like a normal lobby, I would say like a warrior DH and then a holy paladin, or warrior DH resto druid. Often than not, they don't have a dispel for anything they can actually do, so they get like super tanky very fast, very slippery, very fast, very annoying as well. They do a lot of damage, but I don't feel like their damage is going that much lower whenever you're targeting them, because they're always on the move and they're trying to find a spot and a way to actually do damage. It's not like they're very consistent at their damage, they're very bursty like a fire mage, but I think it's a bit more consistent in that. But it's still like one of the targets that are not really enjoyable to go for. But again, it depends if you're like playing versus a purge team or with a purge team. Then it becomes way easier to deal with it, right? Then we are playing with warlocks. Again, I'm gonna take like a few of those easier classes to judge. I think affliction warlock is one of the easiest target to focus because they have only one school of spell. You want to only kick shadow school, and generally don't really want to kick fear too much, except if it's on a healer, but depends about the positioning of your healer. If your healer is behind a pillar, often or not, they're not going to try to fear them because they're going to line of sight. But if your healer is next to you, of course, you have to kick fear because your healer being CC'd is a problem. But you getting CC'd is not always a problem because it breaks after 2 seconds. If you have like a full row of dots, it never like sticks too long. So you actually want to kick unstable afflictions, for example, because it's, again, if they don't have unstable afflictions, it becomes way easier to deal as a healer to actually dispel those targets, for example. You want to kick Malefic Rupture spams because it's very strong. Drain souls, drain lives, all those things are kickable, but also micro CCable, especially those drain life and drain soul spells. And Oblivion as well. So you should really try to make it a job of yours to train it. Of course, don't get baited too much on their TPs. You have to play also smart. Sometimes it's better to just swap targets, but again, that's at your discretion. But I think in general, letting Affliction Warlock just do his thing is never an option. Destruction Warlock, I would say, is the same, even more than Affliction Warlock. And the spells that you have to kick the most on that Destruction Warlock is probably Chaos Bolt. But again, don't get baited too much on that. You have to use your kick at one point. Sometimes it's good to kick Incinerate, for example, or a fear, and then you see him cast Chaos Bolt. Obviously, you have to micro CC him, or try to line of sight that, or try to stun him, or try to do something to stop it. You don't only have a kick, you also have other spells to use to actually stop a cast. And if you're like very smart at it, you don't use stun bolt to just try to do maximum damage. You try to do stun bolt to be very annoying at stopping their casts. If you can actually do that, trust me, Destruction Warlock will be a bit more manageable. Now, Destruction Warlock is very strong. Obviously, they have a lot of instants and they have like 3 school of spells. So obviously, it's very hard to stop every single thing from them. But if you know and you actually play around their strength and you play around your strength, you could actually like minimize a lot of those damage windows that they could have if you're just kicking like a Incinerate or a Fear or a Chaos Bolt. Even kicking a Chaos Bolt is sometimes not enough. You want to actually stop every single cast, or as you know, depending on the situation, if you're like low HP or high HP, if your heal is CC'd or not, you have to know whenever you have to use some CC to stop all those things. Demonology Warlock is a bit less targetable in my opinion, but it's still very targetable. And one of the spells that you actually want to kick, for example, is Hand of Gul'dan, because it is a dual school spell. So they cannot use Shadow, and they cannot use like the Demon Bolt thingies. So again, like Demonic Bolt, or I don't know how it's called, the school spell. Not the spell, but the school of the spell. So you have Demon Bolt. I think it's Demonic or something like that. But anyways, you want to stop that. Shadow. Anyways, I don't know how it's called, but whatever. You want to kick Hand of Gul'dan, preferably, but don't forget to kick Fear. I feel like Demonology Warlocks get away way more than, let's say, Affliction Warlock or Destruction Warlock with their CC usage, because people are like refusing to kick Fears, but they prefer to kick like the dogs or the Hand of Gul'dan. But they don't realize that the pets themselves are actually doing a lot of damage. So kicking a Hand of Gul'dan is not always going to be the thing that is going to stop them from doing damage. But the same for Fear. If you're not like stopping a Fear, the damage is still going to be ongoing, and especially if your heal is CC'd, it becomes very easy to actually get overwhelmed. So those are the 6 specs where I'm very confident to talk about, because I do play those specs. Now let's talk about some melees. I think Feral Druid is also very highly targetable. You will see a lot of like S-tiers targetable specs, because I feel like, again, there's a lot of like variants and a lot of depending of lobbies, but Feral Druid is like the main melee you want to kill. It's very easy to kill. They have like one big wall, which is only 6 seconds, so you could just fear it off or stun it off or whatever you can actually use. It's survival instincts. You want to stop the cast of a cyclone, because the damage ramps up way faster whenever he gets the cyclone off or not. if you can actually stop cyclones with a micro CC or a kick or stun or fear or whatever you can actually use, it can actually make them very frustrated but also very vulnerable. And if you can force them to go bear form, it is a lot of damage that you're going to avoid, and they can also lose a lot of dots on you by going bear form at the wrong time. So you really want to go on the feral druid. Also, I think it's one of the squishiest specs out there, and they don't have a lot of off heals, a lot of self heals, so you should really consider going for feral most of the games. And then we're talking about a healer, for example. I think resto druid is at first sight not really a targetable spec. Yes, it is swappable though, but this video is not about like what is the best swap out there. Resto Druid, if you're like in a man side that you want to train Resto Druid from start to finish, you're going to have a bad time, because it is a very strong spec if you actually know who you're going for. I know I'm the target, I'm going to triple live blow myself, I'm going to have all kinds of hots on me, try to avoid a lot of damage by using my mobility, try to go bear form at the right spots, and try to use my CC whenever I can, vortex you out, and I will just gain a lot of like distance between you and I to actually win those lobbies. But if you can swap, then it becomes very interesting. So you can actually swap them off like whenever they don't have hots, and then it becomes very targetable. But you cannot really have a mindset of I want to target only one guy and it is the rest of the druid. It's not going to be happen, and also going to be easy as well depending on the specs you're playing. If you're unholy decay or a frost decay, I understand that because it's maybe sometimes your game plan, but you have to play around that. So Balanced Druid, for example. Balanced Druid is a very targetable spec. You actually want to target them. They don't have a lot of defensives, but it is very frustrating. I think it's going to be A tier because they always get their damage off. It doesn't matter if you're like going on him or not. It's the same for Elemental Shaman, to be honest. Like if you're going on Balanced Druid, you have to understand that first and foremost it depends on the second target. If it's a demon hunter or let's say a frost mage or a fire mage or a destruction warlock, you have to understand that the damage of a balanced druid will always be the same. They don't really need to spam Wrath or Starfire to get damage going. The Star Surge is instant. Whenever they're doing their go, often there is a root beam on the healer, so you are already on the back foot. It's very hard to just target balanced druid and get on top of him, but I think it's like one of the specs that you kind of go for if you have like nothing above, like for example affliction warlock, destruction warlock, fire mage or whatever. Because if you're like seeing a feral druid, fire mage, destruction warlock or affliction warlock, it's way easier to go for them than let's say a balanced druid. Especially feral druid, if God forbid you're like both of a melee cleave and you have one feral druid and balanced druid, it's way easier to go on the balanced druid and then just swap off on the feral druid like from start to finish and just stick to the balanced druid as close as possible so you can cleave them. Then let's say go for the boomy and let the feral druid just have 3 cyclones, for example. But balanced druid very strong. I think it's difficult to target, but I think it's one of the specs that you kind of have to, depending on the lobbies. Devastation Evoker, very targetable, very poor defensives. I think it's also easy to destroy them and very easy to target them in general. I think it's very squishy again, but it has a lot of damage, so you have to stop a few things. So the main things, again, I didn't talk about it, but the main thing that you want to stop from Balanced Druid is cyclones, pretty much, or if you kick Starfire or Wrath, they don't care, but at least kick Wrath so they don't get to Cyclone. If you kick Starfire, just Cyclone directly, so it's not really easy to do. If you see them cast an Astral ability, you have to kick it because it will help, but it's very difficult to kick that because people are not like playing the builds around astral casting. They just remove it from their spec tree, so they don't get like those astral casted abilities, so they don't get kicked on it and then get punished on it. But Devastation Evoker, what you want to stop is Sleepwalk, if you can. If you can actually kick Disintegrate, I think it's a good kick. Because it does a lot of damage if you let them cast like fully, it's very annoying. Eternity Surge, also a good kick, but Again, it's not the easiest one to do because it's also very fast, and people baits with sleepwalk anyways, but those are like the kicks that you want to go for. Augmentation Evoker, I think it's also a targetable spec, but I think a bit less in general because it's a bit more tanky, and in general you don't play versus a lot of Augmentation Evoker. I think I'm very like meh average on it. I think it's like still a bit tankier than other specs, but I think it's now highly killable. Depending, like if you played season 2 and you play right now, you feel like augmentation is a joke, for example. Let's talk about preservation evoker now. Preservation evoker is a bit targetable, a bit more targetable, but I think healers in general are not like always the plan to go for. If you're depending, again, if you're playing like a double melee cleave, going for resto shaman is a good option, for example. But I'm not like I can't take just one situation and say like this is the general sentiment. I think the general sentiment is you don't want to go for healer. You want to go on another target and you want to see the healer. Yes, there are like a few options where you can actually cleave everyone by going healer, but it's not always the case. It just is way easier to swap on a healer than just focus one healer from start to finish. So preservation is going to be C tier for me in the targetable theme. Rogues, subtlety rogue is, in my opinion, not really targetable. It is targetable, but not that much. I think it's B tier. I would even say C tier. It's too tanky. If they know what to do on a subtlety rogue, they're not going to die stupidly. They're going to wreck and they're going to try to win time over and over and over again. Again, double vanish, very strong. Cloak and evasion, very strong. They can reduce CDs. It just is a very, very strong spec that can survive very long. And you have to be very careful by going for them because it feels like you're getting baited, like most specs. But I think Subtlety Rogue right now for me is C tier, like targeting for me. Assassination Rogue though, Assassination Rogue is one of the easier kills that you have on a melee. I do put them at A tier because again, if they know how to use Vanish correctly, they are going to be a bit less targetable. But in general, Assassination Rogue is always going to be way more easier to kill than a Subtlety Rogue, like way easier. And Outlaw Rogue would be like B tier. It is a good option to kill them, but again, between a good Outlaw Rogue and a bad Outlaw Rogue, it really depends on how they use their CDs, and they can actually avoid a lot of damage, but it's still way easier to kill them than, let's say, a Subtlety Rogue. Let's talk about DKs. I think Frost Decay is also a very targetable spec. They don't have a lot of defensives. Depending on who you are, it is like butter. And also, just in general, you want to target them to stop their Pillar of Frost. You want to CC them whenever they're going for their go. You want to use a CD to defensively help you to survive that go, but also you want to use your Disarm if you are playing a Disarm spec. Every time they're going to do a Pillar of Frost, you want to disarm. No sooner, no further. You have to use it at the right time so you can stop them. But in general, Frost Decay is a very targetable spec in general. Unholy Decay is a bit less targetable, but it's still targetable though. It kind of drops. I think depending on the spec you're playing, you can actually just like cut right through them like butter. And you have to understand that. Again, if you're playing an affliction warlock, I understand it's very frustrating to go for Unholy Decay, but you as an affliction warlock anyways, you kind of cleave, so you don't want to just spam on one target. But if you're an arms warrior, I think Unholy Decay is one of the better targets. Depending on if they're going on your heal or not. If they do go on your healer, you don't want to generally get cleaved down by like one or two guys. But I think Unholy Decay is one of the okay specs to target. And then we're talking about Hunters. I think Hunters is also a very good subject. I think Survival Hunter is A tier in targeting, not S tier because they are slippery. They can kite and they can use some abilities to be very fast and very unreachable. But it is still a targetable spec. It is still very fragile as a spec. They still have like some ranged properties while being melee, so I think just in general, you could go for survival hunter without like thinking, but it depends on who you're facing and who you are as a class or spec. Hunter, I think it's very targetable. You want to go for don't let them free cast. If you are disarm spec, you have to disarm it whenever you can, especially whenever they're doing an aim shot. It's a perfect disarm. If they do rapid fire, you do it on the right time. They get like pretty mad about it because again, rapid fire is where the damage is coming from in general. So if you can get like him stopped on rapid fire by a disarm or a fear or a stun or a micro CC, it has actually a lot of value. But again, depending on specs, if you cannot reach a but still, I would still just go It's you know, the more annoying lobbies are like Destruction Warlock for example, where you have to choose between them and let someone free cast. That's a terrible matchup. And yeah, it's just really not the easiest one to let go, I would say. Like sniper shots, if they can actually cast it like free cast, it's like guaranteed 300k or even more. It's tough. It's really tough. And BM Hunter, I would say, is also very targetable, but again, I think I'm going to drop them a bit because of the reason is that they don't lose a lot of damage if you're going for him. They can be slippery, they can trap, they can scatter, they can... Again, they have like all the properties of a hunter, but their damage is like kind of unstoppable. What you need to do though is root the pets. If you can root the pets, their damage is going to go lower and lower. If you're not like trying to stop the pets from doing damage, you're going to have free damage on you, and obviously you're going to lose a lot of stuff because of that. Let's talk about priest. Shadow priest is highly targetable, but I would say that right now I don't like to go for shadow priest. I'm going to put them top of 8 here. Normally I would go as to go for shadow priest, but you give them catharsis. Again, their damage is right now not that high, and it feels like they're doing a lot of damage on their 4 set. Like I saw a shadow word pain of 163k on me. It was instant because it just popped Shadow Word Pain, and that was because of the tier set, because it stacks up, does a lot of damage, and it will also do the damage of Catharsis at the same time, so it will like give out insane amount of damage like instantly. It doesn't feel like good to go for Shadow Priest on most matchups. You have some matchups where it's just a no-brainer, like for example Shadow Priest with 3 melees. Yeah, you go for Shadow Priest. But I feel like if you're like have a choice between Feral Druid, Destruction Warlock, Fire Mage and such, it's very hard to go for Shadow Priest in most situations. Healer specs, I would say Holy Priest is not targetable. It's very annoying to target in general. You can swap again, like I said, but I would just not go for them in general. If you want to stop them on flash heals, for example. But again, you don't have a lot of stuff to kick because a lot of stuff is actually instant. And Disc Priest, I would say it's also D tier again. I just don't like to target healers in general. I think healers you have to swap on, but like a strategy like Zug one healer from like A to Z is not an option for me. I just don't like it. I feel like it feels very noobish as well because you could just CC the healer, it would be the same result pretty much. But yes, you have some lobbies where you could go for healer and like cleave 3 targets. I understand that, and it works way better if you go for a resto Shaman, for example. But yeah, I don't like that aspect. Speaking of resto Shaman, I think resto Shaman is probably the most targetable of C tier aspects. It just doesn't have too much defensives. It's also very likely to cast. And totems, if you're like next to him, it's way easier to kill a totem. Obviously, if you like, let him like cast totems, he can just try to like hide them. But if you are like on him, it's very hard to hide a totem that you're going to place. So obviously, if you want to destroy totems, it's easier to go for Resto Shaman. But that's why it's C tier, like highest of C tier. But I think going for healer in general is just not my cup of tea. Especially like in social fight. In trees maybe because you can have coordination, you know what's up, but in social fight it's very hard to do so. Elemental Shaman, I think it's A tier in targeting, like targetable spec. You should go for Elemental Shaman because again, a free cast Elemental Shaman, it does way more damage than a non free cast Elemental Shaman. But that being said, I think Elemental Shaman, a lot of their damage is instant and it's very hard to stop them regardless. So that is going to be a tough one. And I think going for Elemental Shaman, it really depends on the specs that you're playing. If you're like a sub rogue, you can win a lot of stuff versus Elemental Shaman, for example. But yeah, I think it's really depending on matchups. Enhancement Shaman, very targetable as well. I think it's S tier. It's way easier to kill. Their defenses are very abysmal and they need to be close to do damage. So going for them, you're going to get damage because you're like close to him, but at least you know that they're going to drop very fast depending on your class and spec. I just think it's an easy spec to kill for a melee, I would say. Let's talk about monks. I think mistweavers are not targetable. I think it's very slippery, very annoying to deal with. It's swappable, like I said. If you swap on cocoon, it's not a targetable thing. It's just a swap. But I think from the get-go, from going to go for mistweaver, it's just a lost cause in general. If they know how to kite, it's very annoying. And depending on your spec, getting kited on it is not an option. So for me, D tier, I think windwalker is a targetable spec, but depending on spec you're playing, it is not as targetable. So I'm going to put them at B tier. I think it's very slippery. It has defensives. They have tools to avoid damage. Now, is every single windwalker using it correctly? I don't think so. But still, depending on the spec you're playing, windwalker is not really the most targetable spec out there. Let's talk about paladins. I think holy paladin is also not targetable. Of course, it's way easier to kill them if you're like doing magic damage. But I think it's troll to go for healer anyways. I don't think it's like the most killable one as well. So right now D tier, I think it's pretty obvious that healers in general are never really a target. Just think about it. Like it's not easy to kill. Paladin, Retribution Paladin S tier. I think everyone knows it's killable. But I think I'm going to put them at A tier because I think most situations where you want to go for Retribution Paladin, it feels troll to go to go do that. And yes, you have lobbies where you could easily go for Retribution Paladin, you could punish a lot of stuff, but it's not always the case that it feels like the most squishiest spec out there. They have like Shield of Vengeance, they have Aegis, I don't know, I think it's Aegis, like the damage reduction ability that they have it like every single minute. They have very little self-heal, but they still have a bit of self-heal. They have bubble, they have bop, they have freedom, they can actually kite damage and do damage at the same time. It's not as an easy kill as you would think, like in season 1 before the rework. Now you had the rework, it is killable. It feels like you're like dying really quickly whenever you don't have the CDs, and depending on who you're facing, Bob doesn't do too much, so you have to sacrifice the PvP talents for it, for the spell warden. A lot of stuff is like dispellable as well. So I think it's A tier. It's not like ridiculous to put them at A tier because I think there are like a few matchups where Retribution Paladin will shine, but like in targeting, I would say. But I think S tier, I don't think like Retribution Paladin is always going to be like the target if you like have an option. Arms Warrior, I think it's very target dependent. If you're like a melee, it's very hard to do and to deal with them because they have Diablo Sword, so Diablo Sword can actually like avoid a lot of damage. I think it's the same as a windwalker pretty much, but of course if like you're a warrior and you're facing three wizards, it's easier to go for warrior. But I think in general, if you have a choice to make and they're like both side by side, you would generally go for the other target than the arms. It's easier to CC arms by a root or whatever you can actually cast. But I don't think it's ludicrous to think that they are like middle of the road, like targeting, I would say. Fury Warrior are easier to kill in my opinion, so I'm going to put them at 8 here. dampening just the job in general. And at one point they will just like fall over. They have like the advantage of popping a CD while they're stunned, but that's it. Dampening is not going to do too much for them. So that's why I'm putting him at the same tier as, let's say, a rogue, for example, like assassination rogue. Demon Hunter, I think it's troll to go for Demon Hunter most of the time. They have Blur, Darkness, they have Netherwalk, they have Glimpse. I think it's C tier. It's targetable like a sub rogue. Yes, depending on matchups, if you're like a sub rogue and you're facing a Demon Hunter, it's easy to kill in a shadowy duel. But outside of that, if you're not CCing a Demon Hunter, they can just pop a CD and react on all of stuff. If you're using all CDs possible and he's darknessing you, yeah, too bad. If he's blurring, it's actually tough to actually even have a CC on him. If they're like using Netherwalk, yeah, too bad. You have to work again for all the defensives and all the possibilities to have like Demon Hunter die. So for me, I think it's like really below average targeting, but depending on matchups, yes, Demon Hunter can do like a good target. But I think like if you have anything above the Demon Hunter, you could actually choose them above the Demon Hunter in general. Also, going for Demon Hunter just means that you're getting cleaved as well. If you're like playing double melee into Demon Hunter, you're going to get cleaved. So it's better to go for the second DPS, which is often a ranged one, for example, and it would be easier for you to cleave them as well. But having the Demon Hunter cleave you both, just because you chose to go for Demon Hunter, is not always a good option. But this is pretty much my tier list. It's a fun one. Again, I think it's not really the most objective one. Again, if you're playing a warlock, I think there are like a few targets that are easier to kill than others. If you're playing like an arms warrior, you would like to play versus a DK, for example. If you're like an MM hunter, you would like to play versus casters, and you would like to target casters instead of like trying to target the MM hunter. But I think just in general that this is really matchup like based. But I think this is a good indication on who you should target in arenas. If you have questions, please let me know. But again, it's very, very, very subjective. It depends on your POV. I play healer, ranged, and warrior, and melee. So I have like somewhat of a broadened vision. But if you're like a sub-rogue main, of course you're going to say, what the hell, Demon Hunter of C here? Yeah, I mean, I cannot really judge spec per spec. I need to judge it as a general thing. I think a general thing would be that Demon Hunter is not really the easiest kill in the game right now, because of all the defensives that they have. But anyways, let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. Hopefully you do subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. If you don't, you can still watch the videos, of course, but it would help me a lot with the algorithm. Like the video if you like the video. Again, thanks for the support. Thanks for everything. I wish you guys a new year in a few days. Hopefully you have some good holidays, and hopefully we do get new news about War Within, new patches, and new blue posts about PvP, because we as PvPers love that. Again, thank you for everything, and we will see each other probably very soon in the next video. Have a great day. Bye.